All right, we are back. Steve McDonald, Ellen Kolb, Skip Murphy, Mike Rogers is on the phone from California. We are here to talk to you about news and politics and opinion and all kinds of good stuff like that. Thanks again to Annika Smith for spending some time with us this morning. Coming up later, we will have Jim Lawrence in the studio, and Avi Malamed's going to be in here to talk about his book and some Middle Eastern policy issues. But we have some time to kill.
That's a great
And we wanted
clip.
to actually talk to Ellen about some life issues, some legislation, more specifically.
Well, there's not much left.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
the House this year looked at... let me tell you about one that is kind of stalled, and I think it's about time we got it. Don't you think collecting abortion statistics is kind of a neutral thing?
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
matter of public health. The state's been working on it for a while. Marilinda Garcia introduced a bill back when she was in the House that was sent to study, or converted to a study committee. Nothing followed from that. The following year, another one came up. It was sent to study, and that one I sat in on. At that time, I was with Cornerstone Policy Research. I sat in on all the study sessions, as did a representative of Planned Parenthood from Northern New England. We heard from legislators, we heard from vital records people, we heard from Health and Human Services people. And when it was all done, everybody agreed on the basics of a statistics bill. And that was introduced. It passed the House. It's had a hearing in the Senate, and we're still waiting for a vote to come up. Suddenly, Planned Parenthood was not present at the last House hearing. I think it's time that we asked our legislators, particularly our senators, let's get statistics. The only people who are reporting how many women get abortions, are there health problems associated with it, what's the age, what's the stage of the development, the only people giving that information are the abortion providers.
Oh, of course.
New Hampshire is one of 3 states and 1 metropolitan area that do not report anything to the Centers for Disease Control.
That's been a problem for a long time.
And it's about, don't you think it's about time to get past that?
You'd think.
It really is.
The abortion industry doesn't want anybody to use that against them. I mean, I remember somebody saying something about, they were trying to pass and or block legislation related to minors getting abortions without parental permission, and they were talking about how life's at risk and da-da-da-da-da. So I went digging, and I found all this data, and there was no data about anybody under the age of 15 dying from much of anything in the state of New Hampshire ever. And then, of course, if you look at the real statistics, when you talk about abortions and pregnancies in general, whether you're carrying to term or not, the greatest health risk is after 40.
You know, if you want
It's
to
not.
invite undercover journalism, try keeping things secret.
Yeah.
But it astonishes me that for so long, when so many different people from different angles were coming together and agreeing on this, I thought, good, we can get this done. And here it is, stalled. And, of course, being in the Senate, you don't know exactly what's going on. But I would bet the rent that it's a 12-12 split, and I know who's where. Let's get on with it. I mean, this year we had another personhood bill go down. We've had informed consent go down. Remember, the only abortion legislation New Hampshire has in effect is parental notification with judicial bypass, and thereby hangs a tail, and a ban on one particular type of abortion, partial birth. A dismemberment ban was defeated this year. A 20-week ban was defeated this year.
And this is, by the way, ladies and gentlemen listening, with a Republican majority in both houses of the state legislature.
That's correct. And so New Hampshire, abortion is legal up to the time that child begins to emerge from the womb, with no restrictions except that a minor might have to go to a judge.
Well, we're seeing that in the national level with the presidential race, where Hillary made lots of linguistic gaffes in her interview. Where
I
she's
think
talking
she was
about,
perfectly candid. She does believe that child is a person. It's a person without rights, and I think that ought to be splashed on every front page.
Oh, it has been, because she just can't get it straight.
We've got a class of people, persons, that she is willing to say, you have no rights.
Well, right, because, and you've got the head of Planned Parenthood going around saying, well, we have to humanize abortion. Well, the only way you can humanize abortion is by dehumanizing the baby, which, they call it, well, it's a zygote, or, stemming from a sperm and oocyte, or it's a massive tissue, or it's
as
a
opposed
fetus.
to mother and child.
And all it is those are just other words that describe scientifically the development of a baby.
I'll tolerate fetus and zygote when you start referring to the pregnant woman as a gravida, which is medically correct, but it's impersonal. It's dehumanizing. A woman is a woman. A woman is a mother. So let's be just as candid about the child.
And you're absolutely right. That's exactly the point they try to do, to basically do everything they can to say, I'm a mother, and I have this fetus growing inside me. No mother does that.
Everything to pit mothers against their children. Abortion
Correct.
Providers rely on that. And caring for mother and child, that is pro-life. So when Hillary said that, I jumped up and down and said, "There, you might not have meant to say it, but you know it.
And she can't
and she can't walk away from it.
No, she can't. And it's rather amusing from my standpoint that she has both the right and the left upset at her over this.
Yeah. I mean, she and Trump both getting both sides against them. Who says there's no unity in American politics?
Oh, that's true. That's very true.
So there's no getting away from the right to life as an election issue. Jobs in the economy as a mantra has not worked. If anybody didn't learn that in 2012, I'm telling you, it's 2016. Jobs in the economy is not going to play with people who understand the right to life or the people who promote abortion. So you'd better understand you're not going to split the difference and say, well, let's not talk about this. We'll stick to the dollars. That's not sufficient.
And that really pits both Doug Scammon on one side, former New Hampshire Speaker of the House, democratically appointed, because that's how he got his position, who takes the establishment GOP stance of, let's not talk about the social stuff, let's only talk the fiscal stuff. And then from the blogger standpoint, you've got Andrew Breitbart who correctly says politics is downstream from culture, and the social issues create the culture, and it's the progressives that have been shaping that culture for decades.
Well, if they would just take all the politics out of the social issues, then we could stop talking about them, couldn't we? But they're not going to do that.
No, because that's their life, that's their bread and butter.
Here we are counting abortions and seeing if women are being harmed by them into a political issue and not a public health issue? Really? We're looking at unborn victims of violence, which most states have, fetal homicide, where over 30 states have such a law, and it's getting blocked. Why? This is something that this has to do with wanted pregnancies.
The other issue was that came up in the legislation you just talked about courts can bypass parental notification. Was that you have young women who may or may not be being sexually abused. And, of course, the left doesn't care. They don't care. They don't care if that's the case. They just care that they can get an abortion after they've been sexually abused.
Well, that was the point I was making last night in my post. This girl in Farmington, with the guidance counselor restraining order against the principal, got the underage child to an abortionist, and got the judges right because she and the boyfriend, were mentioned in the article, were fearful of their safety. Yeah, it's like, I've done a lot less stuff, and I was like, oh, my mom's going to kill me kind of deal. But, nobody ever asked, how old is the boyfriend? The girl is 15. The age of consent here in New Hampshire is 16. No matter how old the boyfriend is, it's statutory rape.
You can ask Owen Labrie about that.
Yeah, and nothing in that article talked about, was this rape or not? Nothing. And I'm going, you get the wrong story. You got two stories wrong at once here. One talked about, and one put under the table.
Well, I think if you even want to divide the people who can think straight from those who can't, just say to your candidates, should there be a statistics law in New Hampshire? And if the answer is anything other than yes and it's overtime, okay, thank you very much. Go to someone else's front door because you're not getting my vote.
Yeah. Well, part of going back to Hillary, part of the questions that she was asked was, well, if 1 foot of the baby is still in the canal, birth canal, is abortion available? And the answer was yes.
Her answer was she was not going to tell a woman she could not determine the fate of her pregnancy.
Which, in other words, is another way of saying, you can do an abortion. But now the question is coming up, at what point does a baby have the constitutional rights assigned to them? We as pro-lifers understand at conception. That is a new life. It's not just part of the woman's body. That's a brand new separate body. You just happen to be taking care of it. Just like we take care of our elders. How long would some of our elders last if we didn't take care of them? Well, they're certainly not in our bodies. The baby, once born, has to be taken care of. That's just the way we have evolved.
Well, that's not the way the law says.
Well, understood, and that's what I'm trying to bring out, is that the baby is always dependent on the mother. That's the way God made this stuff to happen. And you go, at what point do we have the rights given to us by our Creator and nature's Creator actually able to be applied to that? And that's a question that a lot of people on the left do not want to answer.
Well, this came up in the discussions this year and last year over late-term abortion restrictions. Viability, of course, is a function of technology. And in New Hampshire, even in southern New Hampshire, not in the teaching hospital in Dartmouth, but down here, there are facilities for caring for a child 25 weeks, even earlier. It's astounding. If a woman seeks a late-term abortion, is she entitled to a terminated pregnancy or a dead baby?
Wow, what a question to ask.
And
it's
in
a
New
true
Hampshire, this is not a bridge-building phrase, but in despair, I resorted to it at one point. The dead baby caucus is winning.
Yeah, and this is
if a child survives an attempted abortion, do they have the right to be cared for? Not in New Hampshire.
Uh-oh.
Well, not in any kind of place that Obama's voted or refused to vote, because late-term abortions, partial birth abortions, or non-rescue of viable babies have all been themes of Obama as he's come along.
Let me add this. This is personal for me right now. My grandson, that we didn't know we were going to have a grandson, was born November 9th, was not supposed to be due till December 24th.
Ooh.
Has been diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome, was born with opiates in his bloodstream. I'm not going to get into the backstory of how that happened. It's not nice and it's not pretty. It's pretty disgusting.
But the little guy's got a tough row to hoe.
He was born at 3 pounds 11 ounces, and you talk about viability. And it used to be that babies like that died. But you're right, because of technology. We brought him home, and we have physical custody of him at 3 pounds 15 ounces the day before Thanksgiving.
Wow.
And I think part of that is because we've had 2 of our own, but we've also owned daycare centers, home daycare, institutional daycare center. We know how to take care of kids, and we know how to take care of babies. And one of the biggest things that they were worried about was a failure to thrive because of the circumstances of his birth and his low birth weight. I mean, we literally spent 24-hour-a-day care for 2 months to make sure that he would make it, because he was diagnosed with failure to thrive, high risk, and high risk of SIDS because of that. And Debbie and I set up, I won't use the name, but Grandsons Central.
Yep.
Down in our living room, we spent a lot of hours on the couch, a lot of sleepless nights. And I, from that perspective, I go, how can people even think about doing this? Now he's doing much better. He's always going to be small because of the FAS. And his development is delayed, that time span between the 9th and December 24th. But we're seeing the switches turning on. You talk about nature versus nurture.
See, it's overwhelming to give birth to a child like that, but the first step is making up your mind you're going to care for that child, and that's what you and your wife have done.
Right. And yeah, I'm not going to bring in some of the other aspects, but we are trying as hard as we can to make the nurture overwhelm the nature. Yeah. And we're seeing the switches turning on. We're seeing the smiles. We're seeing the interactions.
You can see things that you had no reason to be told that you were going to expect.
Correct. And I look at these abortionists. I look at these people who have abortions in lieu of birth control, who have abortions because it's just not convenient. and you look at this child that we have fought for to make sure that he could thrive, not just live, but to thrive.
To make connections with people.
Right, because one of the big thing about FAS is the lack of attachment, that they will look away. They won't look you straight in the eyes. They don't want to do that. And now we've gotten him to the point that if we're not doing that, he cries.
Well, let's build a culture where that's expected, not where it's the exception.
That's an excellent point. And the problem is, until the abortionist, I put something up, and somebody put up a comment that said, "You should get out of the way of the mother and the child," and I mean the mother and their doctor. And I said, "I will once the government takes my tax money out of the equation." Because that's really what they're trying to protect.
And incidentally, there's no limitation in New Hampshire on who can do abortions either, but never mind.
Well, I mean, you look around in all the states, and they're trying to say you can have your abortion clinic, but it must be held to the same standard as a hospital because you're doing major
That was
procedures.
killed in New Hampshire, too, this year.
I didn't know that.
There is no way that a New Hampshire abortion facility will be classified as
So you could do one in an
ambulatory
alley, really?
I could do one on my kitchen table, as long as I do not hold myself out to be a medical professional, thereby I'd avoid fraud, as long as the woman understood my skill or lack thereof, so there's no fraud or no coercion.
And you could use a clothes hanger.
I can use anything. There is no restriction in New Hampshire on who or where abortions can be performed or who can prescribe the medication that will induce abortion.
And where did that...
Well, I'm sorry. There is a restriction on who can prescribe. But as for surgical, no restriction.
All right.
And where did that die? House, Senate, or at the governor's office?
The House.
Oh, great.
The
All right.
House.
We are coming to the end of the first hour of the program. I want to thank everybody for hanging in. We're coming back in the next hour. We have Jim Lawrence and Avi Malmed on the program, and you should stay tuned for that because I bet it's going to be awesome. So everybody hang in there. We will be right back. This is Grok Talk. Steve McDonald, Skip Murphy, Ellen Kolb, Mike Rogers from California. Stay tuned.